let's talk hydration. We are going to go over how much water you should be getting on a daily basis, why it is so important to keep your body hydrated. We're going to look at some indicators of hydration and some signs that you may be dehydrated without even knowing it. We're going to look at timing, how to get the most out of the water you take in. And we're going to wrap up with some comparisons of water to other liquids. First of all, let's look at that prescription. A great starting point is going to be to take your body weight in pounds. We're going to divide that number by 2, and that is going to be the number of ounces of water you should shoot to drink on a daily basis. So if we have an example of a 200-pound individual, we're going to divide that by 2, and we're going to end up with a starting prescription of 100 ounces of water per day. Now, it's important to know that this is not set in stone. This is not the be-all, end-all of how much water you should be getting on a daily basis. We also need to consider other factors. How humid is it? What is the temperature? How active are you being on that day? When are you taking that water in? How are you getting that water? Is it just straight water, or is it inside of other beverages? These are all things that we need to be considering when we're looking at that number, and it may change on a day-to-day basis. So making sure that we're being smart and adjusting our water intake, and we're not just blindly sticking to a number that was prescribed. Next up, let's look at why hydration is so important, why it has become a buzzword in the fitness and nutrition industry. It is so important to stay hydrated, first of all, because of muscular and vascular function. So if you are dehydrated, your muscles are going to be stiff and tight. It is uncomfortable, it is unpleasant. And if you should try to work out in that status, your muscles will simply not function as well as if you were hydrated. Similarly, blood is going to flow better. It's going to get the various nutrients and other elements inside your body where they need to be, rather than staying where you don't want them. That is going to mean your body will process waste more efficiently. It will transport that waste to where it needs to go so you can excrete it, get rid of it. It's also going to improve digestion. It's going to improve how your body absorbs the nutrients from the food you take in. And it's going to lead to everything being better, the whole picture being better, if we're making sure that hydration is in place. Now, hydration also involves factors outside of liquid. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of sleep, we're getting the right amount of energy from food, we're managing the stress in our life, we're keeping an eye on our hormonal profile, because all of those factors are going to impact how our body uses the liquid and the water that it has. Bottom line, dehydration is bad news, and it's going to prevent you from being your best self. Next up, let's take a look at how to know if you are hydrated or dehydrated. First thing everybody goes to is, what color is your pee? That's great. That's good to keep an eye on. However, urine is not the only indicator. We also want to look at, are you waking up groggy? Are you full of cobwebs and need a few cups of coffee before you feel like a human being? Are you getting headaches? Do you hit that late afternoon and then all of a sudden those cobwebs are filling your mind, you can't think straight? Is that a problem? Are we spiking our heart rate doing simple tasks like getting up and walking across the room? Just going up a small flight of stairs, is that spiking our heart rate? Those are all great indicators that we may be dehydrated. We also want to pay attention to dehydration, because if we're chronically dehydrated, if we're dehydrated all the time, our body's going to hoard what water we give it. So when it needs it, it will be there for our body to use it for those vital processes. So those things that you absolutely need the water for, your body knows it will have it because it's going to hoard it. Now that might mean it's going to cut it a little short in other areas. So it's not going to go to your muscles, which need it. It's not going to go to the blood necessarily. It's going to just dole it out. It's going to ration that water as much as possible because it knows that it might not be getting enough. It knows that it can't rely on enough water coming in. So a great way to lose an easy 5, 10, even 20 pounds in some cases is to just make sure that we're getting enough water and training your body. Yes, there is enough water. Yes, you will be taken care of. And then it can let go of some of those stores of extra water. Next up, let's talk timing. Your activities throughout the day are going to impact when you need to get that water in. So if you're fairly inactive in the morning, but very active in the afternoon, you might not need as much in the morning as you will around that activity in the afternoon, for example. However, pretty much everybody is going to do well to start the day off with a glass of water, often throwing in just a little pinch of sea salt for some electrolytes. You don't want to be adding too much where you can taste it. It is a tiny amount of salt, but it will make a big difference in making sure that our body can utilize that water effectively, that there's a good balance of electrolytes to water. We spent the entire night breathing and dehydrating ourselves. So making sure we're starting the day with a big bump of water, I've found that I will feel more alert and more awake if I start with a glass of water than I will if I start with a glass of coffee, a cup of coffee. So water upon waking is universally a great way to start the day. Next up, talking around meal times, I do not typically recommend having a beverage immediately before, during, or after a meal. Now, the reason for this is we want to make sure that we are chewing our food. Often, if we are having that beverage around our mealtime, we will unconsciously or otherwise be using that beverage to lubricate our throat so we can slide the food down into our gut, or to wash that food down into our stomach without needing to chew it all the way. This is not a great idea for a variety of reasons. Our bodies are designed to chew, to let that saliva get in there and start the digestion process. And if we try to shortcut that, we are cutting out part of the process, and that will affect a number of things down the line. So do not recommend drinking water within approximately 30 minutes of meals. Make sure we're chewing that food. Some people can also have their sleep disrupted by too much water. So what those people can try to do is they can try to time it out so they're getting more water earlier in the day. So they're not reducing their total amount of water. And then as they get closer to bed, they'll be drinking less because they got it taken care of earlier in the day. However, know that waking up in the middle of the night usually has more to do with your stress levels, your hormones, than it does with your fluid intake. So it's usually your body waking up and saying, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, rather than the other way around, which is I need to go to the bathroom and wake up. It's usually the other way around, though not always. But often if you're waking up in the middle of the night, there are some other factors that we need to look at. Finally, we're going to wrap up. Let's talk about how water compares to other liquids. Simply put, anything aside from water is not going to be the best for you. Milk, for example, is great for babies. It's great for people with a weight gain goal if they can tolerate the milk. They're not lactose intolerant or whatever. But if you are trying to lose weight, for example, it is not a great idea to get in that milk. It is very calorically dense, and it is very easy to overdo it when drinking your calories. Then it would, for example, if you wanted to get those same number of calories from a solid food, it is much harder to eat that same number of calories from that solid source than it is to simply drink them. So I would go easy on the milk. Next up, juice. Same story. What we're doing with juice, however, is we're taking all of the great micronutrients, we're taking all of the fiber, and we're pitching it in the trash and just drinking the sugar from the fruit. Not a great idea. Again, very easy to overdo it with juice. Drink it very sparingly. Next, let's talk about coffee. There are some great antioxidants in coffee. However, not only don't we want to hydrate with it, we also don't want to use that coffee as a crutch. So if you are waking up in the morning, you are not a human being until you've had your 2 cups of coffee, you probably need to give it up. Let's take a look at a normal energy curve for the average person. When you wake up in the morning, it's reasonably high. And then once you get out of bed, the blood starts flowing, you've had your glass of water, energy is going to go up. It's going to peak. Usually for most people, it's around mid-late morning. And then gradually throughout the day, it's going to taper off until at night, we're nice and groggy and we can drift off to sleep. Normal, natural energy curve. Now, if we start cutting away at that sleep, if we start replacing that sleep with coffee, for example, and we try to manage our energy curve with caffeine, typically it's going to look something more like this. Start off tanked. No energy in the morning until we've had those couple of cups of coffee. We, pull that energy curve up, and then some spikes and crashes, which we manage with caffeine throughout the day, a few more cups of coffee, and then after lunch, there's that great late afternoon crash, and then maybe you'll use some caffeine to dig yourself back up out of that hole. But then the problem with that is that by the time our body processes that caffeine and it gets it out of our system, our energy curve is way higher than it would be if we had just stuck to our natural rhythm. Now, what that means is we're laying there in bed, heads buzzing, thoughts are racing, and we can't sleep. So then next morning comes around, we haven't gotten enough sleep when our alarm goes off, and we've got to start the whole process all over again. So we've got this horribly dysregulated energy curve, no good. I really recommend for people who are using that coffee as a crutch, cut it out for a month. Cut it out for a month. It sounds awful, and the first few days will be. However, once we reset, we get back into our natural rhythm, we're sleeping the right amount, you will feel so much better than you did when you were relying on that coffee. So it is worth doing in the long run. It is a painful process, but absolutely worth doing. Now, what some people will say is, aha, my energy is way high when I drink that much caffeine, but I can just use alcohol to bring it back down so I can wind down for the night. Well, not a great idea. Alcohol is not for hydration, and it is not for calming down at night. The problem with using that alcohol to come down is that we are again disrupting our body's natural energy curve. And when we take that alcohol so close to bed, our body has to continue metabolizing that alcohol, continue working to get it out of our system throughout the night instead of resting. So our sleep will not be as restful. It is likely to be more disrupted. And a great metaphor I like to use is comparing sleeping to being knocked unconscious with a baseball bat. Being knocked unconscious with a baseball bat is not restful. It is not the same as sleeping. It's just not even in the same ballpark. So make sure that we are not using any stimulant, any depressants to attempt to regulate our energy curve. Any of these are fine in moderation. If you are someone who can have a glass of wine on occasion, that's great. I recommend having it in the afternoon so we can have a nice dinner, so we can get it all out of our system by the time we go to bed. And same with a glass of coffee, a cup of coffee in the morning. Sure, great. Just don't overdo it on any of these non-water liquids. It's just going to wind you up in a lot of trouble. That is it for my talk on hydration. If you have any questions at all, please comment. please send me an email at matthew@matthewsmobility.com or reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram. I'd love to continue the conversation there. Hope this helped, and I will see you next time.